We on there? Good. Good evening, and welcome to the best little museum in New York. Sorry about the heat, but those are no doubt the fires of hell you're feeling, because we have a most salacious tale for you today. To welcome Book Talk and C-SPAN here tonight. Our speaker is Richard Zacks, and he is the author of Island of Vice, which is appropriate because I can tell you from firsthand experience that he is undoubtedly the most wicked man in New York. Much as the good Reverend Parkhurst in his book employed private detectives to take him to the most notorious brothels in Manhattan, Richard has taken me to venues that I cannot even mention in mixed company, not without blushing anyway. Suffice it to say that in one of our tamer outings, he spent the evening of his 40th birthday teaching me to play blackjack up at Foxwoods Casino. Island of Vice is Richard's fifth book of nonfiction. His first, History Laid Bare, Love, Sex, and Perversity, From the Ancient Etruscans to Warren G. Harding, was described in the New York Times as one that specializes in the raunchy and perverse, and was nearly banned by the Georgia State Legislature. Nearly. His second, An Underground Education, was characterized on Amazon as a tribute to the subversive, the contrarian, the suppressed, and the bizarre, and the only book that explains the birth of motion pictures using photos of naked baseball players. Turning to more uplifting history, Richard published The Pirate Coast, a stirring account of the U.S. Marines' nearly miraculous suppression of the Barbary pirates, and The Pirate Hunter, his seminal biography of another esteemed New Yorker, Captain William Kidd, which was named one of the 5 best nonfiction books of 2002 by Time magazine. Now, with Island of Vice, Richard combines all his passions and obsessions to give us an amusing, enlightening, often enthralling account of New York when it was truly depraved, and a young Teddy Roosevelt's attempt to clean it up. E.L. Doctorow calls Island of Vice a delicious municipal history, impeccably researched, excitingly told, while Walter Isaacson writes that here Roosevelt comes alive with all his blustery and belligerent passions, and so does New York City. Booklist described Island of Vice as a fascinating story that Zacks relays with zeal. Kirkus found it a nuanced, comprehensive portrait of a unique man and the surrounding period, culture, and political system, and Publishers Weekly cited the 5 years of research that went into this remarkable recreation of fin de siècle in New York, and claims that writing with a prismatic, poetic slant, Zacks unveils a colorful portrait of a volcanic Roosevelt towering over the soul of the city. And just yesterday on Fresh Air, Maureen Corrigan called it a fascinating narrative. But forget all that. What do they know? Kevin Baker wrote that Island of Vice is as thrilling as the low dives and wanton women it describes. This is the real-life story of an American icon, Teddy Roosevelt, battling vice and as colorful an array of crooked politicians as Tammany ever assembled in raucous old gaslight New York. Zacks does a superb job as both a historian and a storyteller. Richard grew up here in New York, where he once saw Mickey Mantle play in the World Series, played blackjack in illegal East Side card parlors that had key locks on both sides of the door, and was mugged 7 times. Over the years, his travels have taken him to Cairo, where he worked for a time as a card sharp, and claimed he specialized in ripping off the members of a certain Middle Eastern royal family that shall remain nameless on the presumption that it has not been overthrown just yet. Educated at the University of Michigan and Columbia University's School of Journalism, Richard lives today in Pelham, New York, with his wife and family, where he occasionally flies the Jolly Roger from the family flagpole. Besides his books, he has written for the New York Times, the Atlantic Monthly, Time, Life, Harper's, Sports Illustrated, and the Village Voice, among many other publications. Ladies and gentlemen, lock up your daughters and keep a firm hand upon your wallets. I present to you Richard Zacks.
Thanks very much.
Oh, you can either take that.
You guys hear me? Is it coming through? Because Kevin was so incredibly nice in that introduction, I won't tell the story of some of the nights we have shared together. Okay. A lot of what he said was true. So can we turn the house lights down a little bit for the bring the slides up. Can we turn those house lights down or not? Not anymore? They'll see me. They're more important than I am. Yeah? Okay. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. As most of you no doubt know, Theodore Roosevelt was extremely energetic, stubborn, opinionated, and supremely confident. His own uncle said if Theodore ever encounters a stone wall, he will bang his head against it until he knocks it down. His niece recalled playing a game at Oyster Bay that involved walking a straight line, even if it meant climbing over a barn. So here we go. A police scandal hits New York, and the reformers elect a mayor who appoints Roosevelt as police commissioner in May 1895. TR admits that he knows nothing about police administration. He was 36 years old and coming off 6 years as a civil service commissioner in D.C., which is not exactly the limelight. At one point, he feared he might have to spend his life writing books. God help him. He had blown half his fortune on failed cattle ranching in the Dakotas. Ice storms have a way of doing that. Okay, Roosevelt is a strict law and order Republican and a holier-than-thou municipal reformer, and really something of, I don't know how else to put it, a prude. He believed that bridegrooms should be virgins on their wedding night. He was against strip-tease shows on the Bowery. He hated racy entertainment. And this man wants to wipe out vice and corruption in New York City, which was then one of the most corrupt, lewd, drunken, debauched cities in the world. Most New Yorkers thought he was crazy or joking. Within 3 months of his appointment, this is how a major newspaper portrayed Roosevelt. It's almost the premise for a sitcom, or at least a dark comedy. Toss one uncompromising, Harvard-educated reformer into the brothels and gambling joints of Gotham, stir slightly with tough Irish cops, and wait for the explosion. Manhattan in the 1890s. This is Times Square. It's still called Longacre Square. No traffic lights, no stop signs, no overnight parking. Streets seem much wider. Vehicles could ride in any direction, up and down the streets. Thieves stole more horses in New York City than in the entire state of Texas. And they raced to outlaw stables where they painted the horses a different color. I'm telling you, these are chop shops for horses. Look at the sanitation man in the middle of the street. You know, you don't think about it, but there were 60,000 horses in New York City. At least 30 pounds of manure per day per horse. 1.8 million pounds of manure a day in New York City. And that poor guy had to stand in the middle of traffic and shovel it all up. So this is downtown. City's crowded, noisy, fast-paced, had a population of around 2 million people. Housed more Irish than Dublin, more Germans than any city but Berlin. And the spirit of New York, you got to understand this, was defiantly international. This was not an apple pie, waving wheat kind of place. Defiantly international in the 1890s. Tammany Hall, a Democratic political club, think Boss Tweed, dominated politics, winning 7 of the last 9 mayoral elections. And Tammany's arch enemies were reformers and Republicans. And Theodore Roosevelt happened to be both, a reformer and a Republican. Tammany was unapologetically corrupt, and they had a swagger about them. Here's just a quick story that I love. A Tammany contractor's accused of delivering 1/10 of the 1,000 pounds of sponges he's supposed to deliver to the sanitation department. And he's in court, he's under oath, and they said, "Did you do this? Did you deliver 1/10 of the amount of sponges?" And he says, "Hell, did you weigh them dry?" New York fractured along class lines. The so-called robber barons of railroad and coal and steel amassed huge fortunes and often ran roughshod over the laws. These were the days of the Vanderbilts, Goulds, Astors, and of course J.P. Morgan. Here he is trying to attack a photographer. His nose was portrayed in cartoons as the size of a hot air balloon. He wasn't very happy about that. The flip side was a city of unimaginable poverty, especially in the wake of the Panic of 1893. High unemployment. This is the lodging house, Eldridge Street, the women's police lodging